Sorry to break into that happy conversation. I'll call the meeting to order. And if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if we can have a roll call, please.
Trustee Bowser?
Here.
Trustee Rivard?
Here.
Trustee Vanderhyde?
Here.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Here.
Secretary Slager? Here. Vice President Schaffner?
Here.
And President Reed?
Here. Thank you. And we have a quorum. We have everybody present. We'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. And I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support?
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. The agenda is adopted. Brings us to consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Support?
Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. Consent agenda is approved as presented. And that brings us to item 6, and we do have a closed session for student discipline. And I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session, and we will be traveling down to the annex, and then we will come back up. So I'll entertain a motion to enter into closed session.
So moved.
Support?
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. We will move into closed session. While we wait for Scott, I'll entertain a motion to roll back into open session.
So moved.
Support?
Any discussion? Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, we're back into open session. We're moved back into open session. Welcome back. And we're moving on to discussion. And our first item up is North Kent Community Enrichment Bylaw Update with Scott Smith.
So, and as I catch my breath, in the packet, we approved a series of bylaw changes back in December. Since that time, we found a couple of other items that the board wanted to take into consideration for enhancements to the overall packet. Nothing major, but basically the packet as presented is the same content. There were just a couple of legal references that City Manager Womack made, and we just feel that that's in the best interest of the organization to move forward with those recommended changes.
So the other entities got the same bylaws too?
Correct, yes. Yep, so the process, our board approves the bylaws, other boards approve the bylaws, and then they can become enacted by a majority vote of the North Kent Community Enrichment Board.
Okay, any questions, wonderings? Pretty straightforward? Okay, we'll move on, thank you. And next we have item B, East Coast Trip Proposal, the second read with Jen Haberling.
Right, thank you. So as you will remember, the last time we were together, we presented about the fact that we learned some new information about the way that school trips are insured. And so we wanted to make sure that our East Coast trip students and staff members who are chaperoning were covered. And in order to do that, we just need board approval for them to travel as they have for the last 20 plus years to the East Coast trip. So
to item C, the summer property tax collection agreement for Algoma Township with Jeff Malik.
So each year, other municipalities collect all of our tax revenue, and then they disperse it back to the district, so we actually pay a fee for them to do that. This one is actually about a year overdue in signing this agreement. So Algoma Township, and you can see the letter attached, Deb actually wrote a really nice letter, kind of just laying out the rationale for their increase in collection per parcel from 250 to 350. The ISD obviously collects taxes from all the municipalities, so they really kind of track and flag those who are raising their per parcel cost significantly. So if you look at that increase going from 250 to 350, the ISD kind of reached out to Algoma and wanted to know kind of a rationale for going from 250 up to now. I think they're the highest per parcel collection fee in the county, with a couple other municipalities. So, they hadn't raised their per parcel fee in a long time, as you can tell from the letter. And then I have some comparisons there. So this is really just to sign on and agree. It's really been, we just got the invoice for this 2019 collection. So it's really more of a formality. Algoma collects the majority of theirs from Cedar Springs, Rockford, Sparta. So we had the assistant soup of the ISD reach out to Deb, and they had kind of corresponded for about 6 months or so. So it sounds like, this is the information. They're the highest now from all the townships that we collect from. I just got the bill, and the other townships, Nelson, Solon is the next highest at $3, Nelson and Cortland at $2.75, Oakfield is at $2.50, Cedar Springs City charges a flat $2,500, and then Ensley doesn't charge us anything because there's just a few parcels. So, up for discussion at this meeting, and then for action at the first meeting in February. Questions?
Is it safe to assume that any township that collects for multiple districts charges the same to each of
They
the
do.
districts?
Yeah. Mhm.
Do we think the other townships will be going up, or there isn't any rhyme or reason?
It's hard to say. Some of it, I think, kind of depends on probably, like us, how do they have to offset their staffing and their overhead for their collection portion of it. The three of us from Sparta, Rockford, and the ISD and myself, we're taken back a little bit just because it's usually like a 25% hike. So this was something that at the time Mike Haggerty looked into at the ISD. He wasn't real satisfied, I don't think, in the rationale, but the board for Algoma pushed this. So if we had a dispute, we'd have to bring it before the board, essentially. And I think, really Algoma's been, we haven't had any issues with them collecting or in any other area of finance before. So we just want a little bit more rationale, and I think Deb had provided that in the letter that she wrote out.
There's no action here, just for information. We don't really have much.
Correct. Next meeting, you'll have to take action on it. But there's no resolution. Just take action on it, that you agree with the $3.50 per parcel collection fee. In the contract, it's going to be a rolling contract unless we let them know 60 days in advance. So a school district, we could collect all the revenue from all the parcels. But quite honestly, I think, we pay, this year was $12,000 for the entire year, for probably about a $6 million collection in total. So it's well worth the $12,000 investment, in my opinion, rather than having our business office have to do the collecting ourselves. Yeah.
What criteria is there, what guidelines is there from the state? I mean, could they go to $30 per parcel? I mean, is there any kind of guidance from the state that dictates what, I didn't see any material on that.
There is guidance. Deb referenced some of that. I don't know the details of it all though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because $3.50, when you think about billing out for that volume, seems reasonable. I just was curious what isn't reasonable, what guidance do they use for that?
I'm not sure, you know, and I know they're just trying to offset the cost, right? So, and we pay just really a portion of the overall collection fee because the ISD and Grand Rapids Community College pay a portion as well. So the total for all of the collections for the ISD, the Community College, and Cedar Springs is $23,000. Our portion of that is $12,000. Yeah, that's a portion of the share. So again, it was a little alarming just because of the large hike, but they're not the highest in Kent County, and they had kept it at $250 for a substantial period of time.
Any other questions? Again, for action next meeting. Okay, for discussion, the last item is the emergency operation plan.
So in September of 2018, Ken Simon presented our emergency operation plan in a work session. And at the time, the appropriate action for the district was to have the school board president, a school board member, and our school resource officer, as well as the superintendent, sign a cover page indicating that the board had reviewed the document. A recent revision in the law requires the Board of Education now to take action to approve the emergency operations plan with a majority vote of the board members. And so tonight is just simple bringing it up for discussion. We are asking that you take action on this item as well, and so we can have board approval prior to the deadline that is required by law, which is January 31st, 2020. But there have been no changes made to the plan as presented by Ken in this fall of 2018.
Any concerns, wonderings?
Do there need to be any changes?
So it will go through a review process this summer, and so we'll have another revision that we'll be presenting. It'll be reviewed by our district crisis response team that's led by, or safety team, excuse me, which is led by Matt. And so they'll review each step in the process and then make recommendations for approval in the cycle beginning this next fall. But we didn't want to make recommendations now and then make recommendations again in the fall. We just thought, let's stick with what we've got. It needs to be a 2-year plan, and so we'll move forward from there.
So it's a 2-year plan, so then we will bring it back to the board every 2 years.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So to be clear, we're just taking action on something we've already seen, we're already aware of, the law has changed, and we have to take action.
Correct, yeah.
Very well, thank
And
you.
it's included, it was included in the board pack in 2018. There's another copy in the board pack tonight just for reference.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other wonderings? Any clear? Okay, that ends our discussion portion. That brings us to the public comment time, and this would be a time if anybody wanted to address the board for 3 minutes. This would be your time that you could share something. I haven't received any slips that anybody had planned to speak, but I would open the floor now if anybody would like their 3 minutes. Do we have any takers? Nope, I got a lot of smiles, but no takers. Okay, all right, we'll move on then to the action portion of our agenda. And the first item up for action is the North Kent Community Enrichment Bylaw Update. And I'll entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
I'll support.
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde, Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, motion carries. And then we have item B, the East Coast Trip Proposal, and I would entertain a motion as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion?
An
Having
awesome
none?
trip.
Oh, pardon me.
It's an awesome trip. I'm excited.
Any other discussion? All right, having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. We're going on the East Coast trip. Item C for action is the emergency operation plan. I'll entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Support. Any discussion? Vice President Schaffner.
Yes.
Secretary Slager.
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore.
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Yes.
Trustee Rivard.
Yes.
Trustee Bowser.
Yes.
President Reed. Yes. The emergency operation plan is formally in the minutes. The last item is action from our closed session and for student discipline for student 1920.04. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to expel student 1920.04 based on policy number 5517.01.
Support.
Is there any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. Motion carries for expulsion. That brings us to our work session. And we're going to travel over to the U-shaped table for discussion.
And as you can see, we'll need to bring our chairs. Or practice our squats.
Squats. Make a rolling chair.
Go for it.
Matt, you need another chair.
All right, good evening. So this evening, my update is going to have two different focus areas. But one of them is around career and college readiness and the work that we are doing in the district this year and moving into next year. So you might be familiar with Michigan's Top 10 in 10. It's the MDE's goal statements in order to move us toward a premier education state. They want us to be one of the top 10 destinations in Michigan or in the nation for education. So there are a couple of goal areas that really overlap very well with career and college work that we are looking to expand through the K-12 and beyond experience that we provide for students here. The Marshall Plan, which lays forth some partnership with local industry, asks us to work together to ensure a stronger future for us all. You can see that the Goal 1, Goal 2, and Goal 6 of the 10 goals are around many of the things that might be familiar to you from our flight plan work. So we're maximizing lifetime learning and success, students meeting their self-determined academic and personal goals, and assuring that we are preparing a quality workforce. So some of the information that you're going to hear today will tie in specifically to those goals, and then you will also recognize these goals from our flight plan work that this ties into as well, especially enhancing life-focused opportunities. So we're fortunate tonight to have Maddie Peckrell with us. She's a teacher at Cedar View Elementary, and she is here to share with you a bit about what her students have been working with in 5th grade. And then I'll step in when she's finished sharing with you her exciting information.
Okay. Thank you everyone so much for having me. The purpose of this presentation tonight is to just give you a little bit of an overview of what my 5th graders are doing as far as piloting a career readiness program for the ISD. I have passed out some papers for you guys. Feel free to look through those while I'm presenting, and I will explain each one as it comes up in the presentation. The piloting program doing is about 35 teachers from Kent ISD, Ottawa ISD, and Muskegon ISD. Us teachers are getting together to discuss and find best practices for implementing career readiness into our classrooms. Really, the goal is we want our students to be able to go into the workforce and feel prepared. When we reached out to employers, the number one thing they had to say to us was they felt like our students were coming into the workforce without employability skills, without the skills to be responsible, without being able to be on time, just those small things. So really, that's what STEM, this piloting program, is. We want to give our students the soft skills or employability skills, which I'll be using interchangeably tonight. The focus of my pilot in my 5th grade classroom is on responsibility, which is why you have that rubric in front of you. This is just one of the many, many soft skills, but this being a pilot, we're just starting with responsibility. So the goal for my 5th grade students is they are going to leave my classroom this year able to model what it looks like to be responsible and able to recite, be able to tell somebody, this is what responsibility is. But ultimately, we want them to be able to model it. This link right here is actually a soft skill progression by the ISD, and it shows all the soft skills through K-12. So as you can see, the other soft skill my kiddos would technically be working on is reasoning. Because this is a piloting program, we're just focusing on responsibility and getting really good at one thing. The purpose of this progression is if this were in the entire district, our students would be starting out participating, making good choices, learning teamwork, and every soft skill would build on itself. So by the time our students are 12th graders and graduating, they would be proficient with innovation, in addition to all the skills they've had before, with communication being the underlying theme. So our piloting program is actually expanding to middle school and lower elementary this next semester. So as you can see, kind of above and below of where I'm at, those are the next steps. This is just a blown up version of the rubric you have in front of you. There is a pretty large version of this in my classroom that we give attention to, I would say, daily. The students know that these are my 4 pillars for what it looks like to be responsible, and this is actually how we're measuring that. So I think a lot of times we tell our students to be responsible, but we don't really tell them what that means. So this is giving some common language to that, and also giving them this is what it looks like, this is what we're expecting. If you have this presentation on hand afterwards, you can link to the other rubrics. The only other one up there, though, is reasoning, because we're still building this and it's still very new. These are a few other things that we're doing in our classroom. I'm trying to build this into our classroom so it's not just the piloting program, that we're also doing other enrichment activities. This is a career readiness board I have displayed in my classroom. Every single student is on the board with a sign in front of them that states their future career. And it's just a way for them to take ownership and recognize and have their peers recognize that they have a bright future ahead of them and that we're all going to work together to get there. That's probably my favorite thing hung up in my classroom, and it still brings a smile to my face to look at all the pictures. The classroom career application, this year I made a change to how my students get jobs. All students have to apply to get a job in the classroom. They're no longer just handed it to them. On the application, they state the job that they're applying for, what they will do to be good at it, so what makes them good at that job, and then the types of responsibilities at that job. So we turn those in about once a month, and I read through them And it's just a way to practice a life skill. This right here, those are 3 of my boys from our visit to Harvey Lexus this year. That was part of the piloting program. We went to visit the dealership and we looked at the sales and the technician side of the business and what it was like to be a responsible employee there. That was my first time doing a trip, but that will be something I never ever forget. I still wear my Harvey Lexus lanyard to school every day. And there's another picture up here. My kids are in sunglasses, and they wore those sunglasses from Harvey Lexus for like a week. So that's something we still talk about. That was a really fun trip. And then lastly, I'm trying to build in some more life skills like writing checks. I haven't done this lesson yet. I'm going to grad school right now at Western, and I'm taking career tech ed classes. So I'm learning how to put in the employability skills and life skills into my 5th grade content. So it's very new, I'm still playing around with it, but that's my goal. And then one last thing, I don't have it up here, the responsibility notebook in front of you, if you flip through that, that's what my students fill out weekly. So if you go back to this rubric, they pick a goal every week, whatever pillar, and really we've done it together. Next week will be their first week choosing on their own, and we set goals for being responsible. So this responsibility notebook is touched about twice a week in the classroom. It's really authentic to them. I don't necessarily tell them what to write in it. I just give them, hey, this is the goal we're going to be working on, and they set their own. It's in the context of school and at home. So how can we be responsible in both places? This slide is probably the most important slide up here because without my students, this would not be possible. And I truly, truly think this group of kids I have is going to make a huge impact on the world. I 100% believe that in my heart. So they've really been amazing and adapting to this so well and really taking it on full force. So I'll give you a minute to read through some of the comments that my kiddos said. We also had School News Network come into our classroom, so I did provide a link because Chris Gear did interview some of my students, so there's more student comments within that. This is my student, Hayden Verdine. She's actually here tonight with her family. All my students were asked to answer a prompt, why is career readiness important to me? And their audience for that paper was my dad. My dad teaches career tech ed at the Tech Center. He teaches automotive technology. So he actually read all the papers and decided on which one should be presented to the board tonight. So Hayden was chosen special for that. So I'm super proud of her, and she is up there reading her paper for you guys.
Career readiness is important to me because there are responsibilities that we have to follow during a job. It's also important to me because we can figure out what we want our future careers to be. Now I understand what we need to use in our jobs. 1, complete in our time. 2, integrity. 3, follow through. 4, accountable. We also went to Harvey Lexus. There we asked a lot of questions about how they showed responsibility. Therefore, career readiness will help me plan my future and how I can show responsibility during my career and any time I need it.
As you can see, Hayden could have come up here herself and given a presentation, so just really proud of her and how well she's really in the effort that she's put into this. Kind of the last thing is, what is this going to look like in Cedar Springs? Really what I'm looking for is to put an intentional effort into getting our students to college and career ready. Whether students are going to college or not, they're going to have some type of career. So being really intentional and thoughtful about implementing this into our district. We're also looking for additional opportunities to expand our piloting program like I mentioned. So on February 14th, after our district provided PD, I'm giving another presentation to some of the other staff members to see if they're interested in piloting this program alongside me. And last, and I think most important, is just really enthusiastic and informed teaching practices. This is something so new, so I'm learning every single day as I go. But I firmly believe that if we tell our students that we believe in them and that we see their future and we want to support them, that they are going to be very receptive back. The final thing I have for you is this is the picture of my class and my mom at Harvey Lexus. We went for about 3 hours, and that is my favorite picture. And one last thing is Eric Kelleher. He works at the Kent ISD with the Career Readiness Program. He's been a huge support in this, and I really could not have done this without him. What questions do you have?
Question about your the notebooks here, which are really interesting when you give them the freedom to show what they
Yeah.
say. Do you ever share with the class and then give them feedback, or how do they get feedback based on what they've written?
A lot of times I keep it pretty private, so I just walk around and give that quick formative assessment and read over their shoulders.
Okay.
Some kids share out when we give examples. Other kids choose to just keep it personal to their own life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you do house calls to teach teenagers?
Not yet, but maybe if I teach
Maybe
middle
hated.
school. Yeah,
Maybe
we'll send
hated.
Hayden over. That actually would be great.
So, let's, Hayden, would you come up here for a minute? Can you do that right up front? Let's go right to the source and see how this works.
Okay.
Stand right up here for us. Hi, Hayden, thank you for coming. Hayden, when you filled out your application, what job did you apply for?
I applied for Secretary of Public Relations and
Okay, and what job are you doing?
Secretary.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about responsibility as a secretary?
So you have to be really nice to other people because some kids may do your job for you when like you forget to. But you just gotta let it go and like do it the next time and remember that. And then you have to remember to do your job each day.
Very good, very responsible son. And is it fun in the classroom going through these responsibilities and learning?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much for coming up here. It's good to hear from you so we understand that it's working well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think your students are going to change the world too.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Any other questions for you?
I think it gives them a lot more work to their job.
There's definitely.
It's applicable to what their goals are someday.
Yes, and it's definitely just given more context to the things that we do in the classroom every single day. Thank you. You are all free to keep the rubrics, but I do need back my job applications and notebooks. I'll come around and collect them. Thank you.
Thank you so
Jen,
much.
did you want to finish up?
Yep, sure. So I do want to invite you to our February 14 Professional Development Day. Like Maddie said, the Career Readiness Lunch and Learn, you're welcome to join us for that. And she and Eric from Kent ISD will be presenting the opportunity to expand on this pilot. It's probably the best kind of professional development that you can have, to have someone meet with you and work with you throughout the year and support you as you go as a teacher. So Maddie's been really fortunate to be a part of that, and we're excited to be able to extend that next year to some other teachers at levels above and below where Maddie is in 5th grade. In addition to that, on February 14, if you'd like to join us at 7:30, we are still focusing on MTSS as it is a big part of our school improvement plan and part of what we've been working on in professional development. And at that time, we have several local and international speakers. We are fortunate that the creator and director of Mindlessly, which is the organization that began the MTSS work, has said that he would be glad to come speak to our group for free. So it's kind of a big honor that he will be coming to talk to all 300 of our teachers, and all of our support staff as well are invited. And then several local people, one from Michigan Department of Ed and one from Kent Intermediate School District, will be coming to share what the future is of PDIS and multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, and where we're heading. They'll be able to share some of the common pitfalls that we hope to avoid. Always you hope to avoid the pitfalls. And some of the things that they're seeing beyond just what's happening in classrooms into what's happening in workplace. So as an example, Friday night I was sitting with my husband and he started talking about they're doing positive behavior interventions and supports at Fifth Third Bank, of all places. He said, we had our Compass Feeding Awards and the managers all had to nominate people who were doing one of the 4 pillars that they have decided as a group and what that looks like, and then they did some awards on Friday. So it's really interesting to hear how that even filters into the workplace. Then at 9:30, buildings will be working in building teams led by their principal on analyzing their data and making their next steps forward. So you all are certainly welcome to come and join us and be a part of any or all of that that you'd like to join for. Any questions about that part?
The only question I have is, we have one 5th grade classroom doing this. What's the traceability, the trackability of the effect on the program?
That's a great question. We also have some PLC groups that are focusing on career readiness at the high school level, especially in the practical arts. They have focused a lot on bringing people in to speak to their students from a variety of career zones in Michigan. And they've said, not just in terms of this piece with the rubric, but more in terms of students' interest and how that has been kind of filtered out into their classrooms and what they're hearing from students. Brian Busen shared that they have more students interested in the military than they ever have because they brought someone in to speak and to share that it's an opportunity to have your education paid for you. And many students said, I always thought I wouldn't be able to go to college. This gives me a pathway to achieve the goals that I want. And they didn't realize how many different career paths are represented in the military. So we are seeing some effects, and I'm excited for Maddie's enthusiasm because always what speaks to teachers is another teacher doing it in their classroom and finding success. So hopefully after the 14th we'll have a good idea of how might we branch out, but then also how can we follow those students to see how that works. And
Right, that's what I want to see is they're going to go into different classrooms next year and how do they respond to these other
How does that, with Mrs. Cannon's career life skills, so is it kind of branching with that also? Because I know I've spoken there before, and then she has where like she'll have volunteers come in and the children or students will like have mock interviews for jobs, and that, I mean, a lot of kiddos said it was really helpful, and it was nice to see how they did their resumes.
Right. One of the top levels of this rubric was about innovation. We also have an opportunity through the ISD to participate in an innovation day, a student startup day at the high school level, where we can send 2 or 3 teams of 4 students to participate with something, I think it's called Startup Garden in downtown Grand Rapids in the Chamber of Commerce. So they're getting together some teams to send to that, and it's a Shark Tank-like competition. And then that competition happens once a month as well, where there's real money involved. So if you win, you might have someone give you some seed money to actually bring that to fruition, and that idea at least get started with it. So they have several local banks that have partnered with them to make that a reality. And then there is some local competition that's happening once a month for high school students. So we're tapping into that as well. I know, it's exciting. I think the more opportunity a student has to see what's happening in a real workplace, the bigger their vantage point is for what's possible for them. So I'm excited to support that work. And then lastly, this is not connected at all, but I wanted to give a little update. We have a request to take a look at how we are offering high school PE credit. So there was an ask about what could count for PE credit. And you all have had this discussion before, I believe, in the past. But I just wanted to make sure that we reviewed the different options here today. So the Michigan Merit Curriculum lays out that students in high school need 1 credit of PE and health. And that can be divided into 1 credit of PE and health, or a half a credit of health, and a district-approved extracurricular activity, something that involves some kind of physical activity. It also gives an option for a personal curriculum, so if there's a student who wants to go above and beyond what's being offered at the high school level, or they want to take more 4 classes, they can opt for a personal curriculum and exempt themselves. And lays that out for us. The way that we have decided to approach it, and that you all approved a number of years ago, is students can take a traditional path of 1 PE class a semester at Cedar Springs High School, or they can have 2 full seasons of a sponsored sport that's offered through the school district where we can see rosters and things like that. Or 2 years of high school marching band. Again, that's something that we control and we can see who's been in it. It also would transfer with a student if they transfer in from a different district and want to use that option. We would be able to see on their transcripts that that works. Or again, the option for a personal curriculum. So just to be, in case someone asks or in case you're ever approached about it, those are the 4 different ways that we offer in Cedar Springs for students to fulfill that PE credit. Any questions?
What would a personal curriculum look like?
So that's really just looking with the counselor and the family or the student to say, what are your goals? What are your long-term goals? And if part of your long-term goal is that you need additional math classes or additional English classes, then you would have the opportunity to take those in place of PE because it's pushing you further down that academic path. And that's really what MDE sets up. It also could be a personal curriculum for someone who has special concerns about a health situation or a mental health situation that might prevent them from being able to successfully take the course, and then it would be replaced with something different. So it's very individualized what counts as a personal curriculum, and it's just a working plan with the counselor, the administrator signs off on it, and that's how that's arranged.
Could a personal curriculum look like, I know this is going to come back to, but could it look like somebody participating in Shrek, for instance? Could that be possibly considered?
Well, so
with the personal curriculum part?
yeah, thank you for asking that question. One of the reasons that it wasn't considered before as an option that we just automatically put the musical as one of those like 2 full seasons kind of thing is that the musicals change each year.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So it would have to be a personal curriculum that acknowledges the limitations of the student or the acceleration that they want to have happen through the curriculum.
So conceivably, if my daughter, for instance, let's just make it about me. If she went in and was like, I'm dancing 4 hours a day after school, 9 hours on Saturdays for this school function, can we make my personal curriculum work with that to make that go towards a credit? Is that something that's possible, or is that going to be just?
I think that would need a little bit more research in terms of what MDE intends for the MMC curriculum. Okay. Yeah. But again, a personal curriculum is very individualized, so it's meant to be a case where a counselor who knows a student and a family talks together about what's allowable.
Because I understand why we don't have musicals on there, because they're not all dancing, and not every character necessarily is dancing a lot, but if it's personalized, I'm just wondering if they're different people.
Yep.
So if I could clarify, so one utilization of the personal curriculum is to provide students with an alternate course selection out of our current. Yeah, so rather than granting credit for all of these other different things, a student could not take phys ed so that they could take another math class, or they could take something else in another. So there's I guess it's one of 2 ways. I don't know that we can necessarily grant credit for musicals, but we could give students an opportunity to not have to take phys ed if that was something that they were really dead set against taking.
But is that
You
only?
can't sub things in for it. I mean, it has to be a path that is for an alternative something else. You don't just sub it in.
Correct. You'd have to go through the
substitutes are already set.
Yeah, you'd have to go through the personal curriculum route with a counselor.
I'll give an example from my own life. So that bottom bullet point, designed for students who need individualized learning requirements, My son was deaf and wasn't able to take a world language in the traditional sense, so they did a personal curriculum in order to address that particular learning requirement for him, instead of taking a class that was an auditory other language to learn. So just an example of what might qualify for something like that. Does that make sense?
So you mentioned a semester of PE or 2 years marching band show up on a transcript, is that correct?
Well, a student would be enrolled in marching band as a course.
Okay.
So if a student were to transfer in, we can verify that that has been the case.
And where are 2 full seasons of MHSA sponsored sports recorded for?
That would be a roster. And again, this was what the board approved, I want to say back in 2014, maybe was about when that happened. So just really a review of that.
Do you foresee that personal curriculums are going to increase if we hire an additional high school counselor, or what's your projection?
I actually think our high school team has done a lot of learning just this year around personal curriculums, and I have not yet been a part of that. I think that it's more robust than we've been exercising, but in a way that allows students to differentiate their academic experience to meet their goals. And I think that would be celebrated by most people to say, you know, for example, if you know what your career path is, what are the steps that get you there, what is the experience that we can put in place and help you reach those goals without exempting you from things that you might change your mind about. So, you know, we know that sometimes ninth graders don't make a decision that lasts for the rest of their life. So we want to make sure that we're giving them an opportunity to be successful if they choose what they think is their goal now, but it doesn't exempt them from something that might be their goal in a year or two. So I think a personal curriculum allows us to have some of that flexibility, and they're just starting to explore how they might want to utilize that in a different way. In addition, with the help of Stacey Glasgow and special services for students to think about it a little bit more broadly than we have been thinking about it. Okay?
I would applaud that.
How common is it right now?
I don't know how common it is here. It seems like, in my experience, it's something that sort of has been shied away from by schools. But I think as the merit curriculum has settled in a bit, and even there are some changes that are being suggested now, but I think even as that's settling in a bit, people are realizing that we really want to help students be successful after. I mean, today on my way to work, I saw a sign that said, "We help students succeed after college." And I was like, we want to help them succeed before college even, right? That's our job here. I think that would be welcomed, as long as we have the systems in place to make sure that we're helping students make wise decisions.
PE and health, though, can also be good for long term. You're thinking about investing in somebody's body, the longevity of their life, their personal health, stretching to avoid injuries in the future. So I mean,
right.
I don't want anybody to walk away with an area that PE and health isn't good long term, because it certainly is an investment in themselves too.
And this is just one that the Michigan Merit Curriculum calls out as having this special circumstance. There are others as well. I would agree with you. I would think that that's why we would say participating in a sport or participating in marching band. We want students to be physically active. That's important.
But there are, that exists for a certain reason, which is still
mm-hmm.
And it reduces anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And all of our PE course descriptions state that is very much a goal, that it's for the long-term well-being of our students, lifelong participation in physical activity. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you for writing your
Thank you.
approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll switch gears to a business office update. Keep in mind that the next board meeting, February 10th, We're going to dive right into a detailed look at the district's budget. So I'll present to you a proposal for a mid-year budget amendment. So heading into that, what I'd like to talk about tonight is more of a macroeconomics look at the nation's economy, the state of Michigan's economy, and a little bit more of what's going on locally, because there is some trickle-down effect. Okay, so some of that does impact us in Cedar Springs a little bit as we look through our budget this year and future years too. So, one thing my group at the ISD level has been talking about is, can the good times keep rolling? Okay, so we know that we are in quite an economic expansion. If you take a look at just the last 30 years, we're in 9-10 years into a pretty robust expansion. The S&P 500 10-year history. Hopefully, if you have some money tied up in some investments or 401k, the money's not good until you need to take it out, right? But it gives some consumer confidence having those portfolios look a lot better. So there's quite an increase return investment in the S&P 500. Our unemployment is the lowest it's been in 50 years. Okay, so it's very easy for people to find jobs in most of their career paths. State of Michigan, if you look at since 2000, when the median household income was just over $40,000, that has risen to now about $62,000. So over 50% increase in the last 28 years. Now, the interesting thing is this blue line really adjusts for inflation. Okay, so the purchasing power really may not have increased. Dipped substantially in Michigan during that recession, but the purchasing power has just increased slightly. Okay, so another way to look at it there. Our Kent County taxable values. We've seen almost 18% taxable value growth in the last 5 years. I know this is hard to read, but what I want you to look at is during the recession, we did have some years where taxable values declined. We've bounced back, so what that means is more money in the pot for local districts in terms of Act 18 revenue, which is used to offset some of our special ed expenditures. And we have been able to pass an enhancement millage, and that's gone from about $210 per pupil in revenue to about $225 per pupil in 3 years. So those taxable value increases are helping. So the good times keep rolling in the school aid fund. All right, so we see the dip here during the recession in the school aid fund. But if you look at the chart over here, some of those recession years, we actually did see some slight growth coming out of the recession starting in 2010, and then really it's stabilized since about 2013, 2014, and have just seen pretty steady growth in that school aid fund. And there's the graphic for it. So that's a pretty steep curve there. So that's very welcome. We'll talk about an impact of maybe why we don't feel as much of that money when we get to the end of the presentation. So here's another chart of funding increases. So we are at the minimum foundation allowance. So in the last 6 years, we've seen increases in the foundation allowance of $175 per pupil, $140, $120, $120, $240, and $240 the last 2 years. So it's been very welcome. Intermixed in that is in the spring of 2017, we had the enhancement millage that again brought $210 per pupil into the general fund for unrestricted revenue. So just in the last 3 years, about $845 per pupil. So definitely very welcome revenue. I talked about this at the last board meeting. So we had just recently, a couple of weeks ago, all the state economists got together, and they had the January Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, and just really looked at where did our revenues come in from the last fiscal year 19. How do we project our revenues this year in fiscal year 20, and then one more year out in fiscal year 21. So the general fund has actually seen about a $250 increase in actual revenue last year, fiscal year ending September 30, then they projected in the May Revenue Estimating Conference. They're projecting an additional $230 million this year and about $274 million in the general fund next year. Okay. For the school aid fund, it's not quite as robust, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that they really pegged their projections, okay, and increased them slightly. And then here's just some detail on why they kind of increased those. For last year, the revenue increases really were stronger than expected growth with withholding payments, and that's because wages have started to increase at a more rapid pace. Corporate income tax collections were higher, and then they had a little bit lower than expected Michigan business tax refund. Okay, so that's a lot of what's driving this general fund increase that the projection of. Key interest rates. So if you remember last year, a year ago, the Fed discount rate, the overnight rate to the banks was about 2.5%. And the Fed there was some scares of a recession, so the Fed ratcheted that down a quarter point or 25 basis points 3 times. And now today, a year later, we're at about 1.75%. But keep in mind, when the Fed lowers that rate, it's really good for consumers. Okay, because what that means, it really means it allows banks to borrow money at lower rates, so then they can loan out the money at a lower rate as well to consumers. So that's going to impact mortgage loans, auto loans, other lines of credit. This is just a chart to show, if you really look 1 year ago at a 30-year tax-exempt bond, a AA rating was, at about a 0.2 or about a 0.18. It's about the same. Really, all this confusion is to show you that it's a great time for municipalities to issue debt, okay? And we saw that when we did our refunding just this fall. So here's the $1 million question. Will the good times keep rolling? And there's tons of opinions out there, right? So lately, if you ask some CFOs, 38% are going to predict a recession this quarter. Now, that might not be happening, okay? So some of this data is, from a couple months ago. 84% a recession by the first quarter of 2021, so a year out from now. All right, we look over here. This is really, it's looking at in February of 2019 to August of 2019, when will the U.S. economy enter recession? So, 72% from August 2019, about 4 months ago, 72% of respondents thought that there was going to be a recession sometime in 2020, 2021. Later than that, about 14%. Okay, so that's just interesting. We've had obviously a couple things that have impacted that GM strike. Manufacturing sentiment isn't quite as good lately. This one is interesting. 75% of the ultra risk forecast the U.S. recession in the next 2 years. Okay, so again, that's out there. The bull market. Can the bull market continue its strength? This is the longest bull market on record. So it started in March 9th of 2019. This is actually back August of 2018. We'd already eclipsed that 1990 kind of tech-driven bull market run. So bear market and a recession. Here's some historical data. So if you look at these economic expansions, obviously an expansion ends when we have a contraction, okay? So if you look down here, when we've had those recessions, the S&P 500 here, in the early 2000s, that S&P 500 dipped 49% after that expansion, okay? So talk about just kind of consumer confidence when your portfolio dips that way. After the last recession, it dipped 57%. And then you can see some of those years even back to the 70s. But we're really experiencing a nice expansion right now. But again, beware of the bear. Okay, it's going to follow the bull. Inverted yield curve. I don't know if any of you heard about this back in the fall, but basically, a lot of economists say that an inverted yield curve can predict the next recession. So what drives an inverted yield curve? Well, typically, if the sentiment of the short-term economy is really good, then investors are going to need a higher return to tie up their money for a long period of time, so the short-term rates are lower than the long-term rates, okay? If the yield curve inverts, it basically means that the sentiment and the outlook on that short-term investment is not good. So to tie up their money in the short term, they're going to need a higher return. So those short-term rates then become higher than the long-term rates, because everybody's going to run to a safer long-term investment, which drives the demand. The demand's already there, so they can get a lower interest rate. For your reading pleasure, here's a little bit about the inverted yield curve. But it's interesting, going back to this. So if you look at this green line are the short-term rates, that's the 3-month treasury, compared to the blue line, the 10-month. So if you look right here, that green line got above the blue line. This gray area is a recession. Okay, over here, green line got above the blue line. What do we have? Recession. We saw that green line for a small window of time this fall go above the blue line. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to immediately follow, but throughout the course of history, it's been a decent indicator. Okay, so again, the good times are rolling, but we want to keep some of these indicators in mind. So here's the million-dollar question, right? How does it impact us? What are some potential risks that Michigan and SAF as a school aid fund face? Okay, now I just want to focus on one issue that's I think facing the school aid fund, and it's really the MIPSR's retirement liability. Okay, so that's the Michigan Public School Employee Retirement System. All right, that's $50 billion worth of retirement assets. That's the pension system for our public school employees. These are the history of investment returns, over the last 12 years. I think there's 11 here running. 2019 data is not in yet. But basically, to pay out retirees, the investment earnings drive those payouts. 65% of the payouts depend on the investment earnings. 28% is employer contribution, so that's the district contribution, and then the employees contribute the 7% on average. What's happening is we've seen our pension, the funding level of the pension back in 2008 was only about 83% funded, 84% funded. So the actuary said, you've got about 16% that's unfunded. You're not at 100% funded. That percentage has only dropped in 2018, even after some robust years of earnings. Okay. Now, what's driving that? Well, we've also had this dedicated gains policy that was put into effect by the legislature. That basically we had an 8% rate of return that we assumed we'd get each year. And I'll tell you what, if I projected an 8% rate of return on my portfolio over 30 years, I'd be putting less in, right? Because I'm thinking my return, if at 8% is going to be great. Typically, 5% is about all that financial planners are looking at these days. So what happens is this dedicated gains, when we have a return above that 8%, we buy down that rate of return. We bought it down to about 6.8%. The problem with that is then when you're projecting your payouts for retirees, you're projecting on a smaller return. So in the short term, it's going to increase that unfunded liability. Okay, so it's an interesting concept there. So here's what employers were paying back in the 90s. We were paying just over 10% of so 10 cents, 12 cents on every dollar of a wage we have to pay into the pension system as Cedar Springs Public Schools. Well, that unfunded liability grew, so the actuaries are saying you've got to ratchet up that number to keep this pension system fully funded. Well, then I think it was about 4 years ago, no, longer than that, 2013. Basically, the state said, we're going to cap for the employer, Cedar Springs Public School, we're going to cap that amount you contribute for the unfunded part at 20.96%, which is still pretty high. The state's going to have to pay the rest of that unfunded liability. Okay? So, if you look at this gap, this is what the district's paying. Now, it's above 20.96% because there's a normal cost just to keep up with the normal cost of the funding the pension system. So the normal cost is usually around 6%. So it's 20% and 6% that the district pays. But look at this gap that the state has had to pay. So we have, between the state and Cedar Springs for our employees, we're paying about 40% into every wage that's earned here. So 40 cents on every dollar we pay just to the pension system. Okay? It's a substantial amount of money that we're contributing. Now, there is an end in sight, okay, but that end in sight, according to the actuaries, is about 13 to 14 years down the road. All right? So here's the amount that the state has had to kick in. So that's this amount right here. So the state aid fund has really had to burden up to, in the last couple of years, over $1.2 billion just to pay down that unfunded liability. That's $1.2 billion that is going towards public school employees' retirements as a benefit, okay? But again, it could be designated to some other things. I just threw this up there because when we do payroll, these are all the different plans that a public school employee can be in and all the different contribution rates. So, public school payroll is a complex process, but a lot of this has to do with some of these percentages with that pension liability, okay, the amount that the district or the employees contribute to the pension system. So, the general fund's been pretty robust in terms of revenue. School aid fund has seen some growth. However, there are a lot of commitments that the legislature has committed to. You know, for instance, road funding. The original road plans are going to reduce the general fund revenue by about $800 million in fiscal year 2020. So that's the next fiscal year. So we've got to pay for those somehow. We're still reducing general fund revenues by about $657 million a year. That's the projection for the business tax credits. So the total impact of tax change on the general fund revenue is going to be about $1.76 billion in this current fiscal year, and then closer to $2 billion in the next fiscal year. So I think that we, again, the good times are rolling. We just have to keep some of those obligations in mind as we move forward and as business officials for school districts. We start looking at projections and starting to build. I'll start building next year's budget, as early as the end of this month after we adopt the mid-year number. So what does it mean to us? How are we positioned? So I only have a couple slides left. How are we positioned for a downturn? Well, this, I think, is interesting data. We have been a growing community, and more students and seats means more revenue for the district. So if you look at just Region 1 in Kent County, there's 3 regions in the city of Grand Rapids is separate. Here's the enrollment data over the last 6 years, and I find this interesting. If you look at us, this salmon-colored area, that means we're gaining students. So we've gained about 150 kids over the last 6 years. Rockford is the only one that has gained, and really out of 8,000 kids to gain 20, they pretty much stayed flat. We're the only district that has grown in students in northern Kent County, okay? So I think that says a lot about the community, maybe our proximity to the Grand Rapids metro area and in the school district. So it's a great sign. You see Caledonia, Kentwood, Thornapple, Kellogg, Byron Center. Some of those districts are in the M6 corridor, where we've seen a lot of growth, right? A lot of residential growth and some commercial growth as well. So I think it's just interesting. We are pretty stable, and the enrollment increase is really helping us financially to be stable. And then the fund balance. So this is sorted by 5-year percent change over the last 5 years. So here's the column that's sorted. We are second. So we've increased our fund balance by about 6.7% over the last 5 years. If you look at this column, this is as of our last audited fiscal year. It's not sorted, but if you look through that, our fund balance at 19.9% is the second highest in the county. So if there is, again, good times are rolling. If there's a downturn, we are pretty well positioned to weather that downturn, which is a positive thing. So definitely more districts than not have been adding to their fund balance in recent years. Again, some districts have been dipping into that a little bit. Macro outlook, nation, state, a little bit how it impacts us. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. What questions do you have?
So you shared a slide indicating 38% of CFOs think the economy is going to go into a recession this quarter. What does our CFO think? And what are you doing to help us be prepared for that? Whatever your outlook is.
If I could predict it, I would be on one of the noonday trading shows. And so here's my thought. And I actually have a Huntington's chief investment officer has a breakfast this next week, and I'm going to it with a couple other business officials. Really excited about it. My thought is this. This expansion has been pretty moderate, and I think between monetary and fiscal policy, we've done a pretty good job of managing inflation and also maintaining growth and unemployment. So some of the expansions in recent years, we've seen GDP growth of 4 to 5%. This one's really been 2 to 3%, so it's been much more moderate. I think that this expansion could continue. I don't think it will continue for forever, but I wouldn't be in that group of 38% of CFOs. So I am worried about Michigan a little bit, and I think 10 years ago when we hit the recession, we talked a lot about making sure that we had a more diverse economy in the state. We're still pretty tied to the big three in the auto industry. So that is a little bit of a pitfall, I think, that we've made some progress in, but probably aren't where we need to be.
I have a dumb question. said right now is a good time to take on debt because the rates are low.
Mhm.
If we were to go into a recession, what effect does that have on the rate? Does that make the rate go up? Does it make it go down? Is it unpredictable?
It might not necessarily make them go up. Typically, you know, it would help rates. You know, I just, there's really nowhere for them to go.
Okay.
So I would say that, and sometimes they lag a little bit, so I would say that they're not gonna move a whole lot.
So if we were to pass a bond after the recession starts, let's say,
Yeah.
is that gonna affect the rate we get on our bond, or is that set before?
No, it would affect the rate when we issue it. So if we pass another bond, we probably wouldn't issue debt until the spring of 2021, so a little over a year from now. The rates may move up. They're really the only place they have to go probably is up, right? However, if there's a recession, typically you can get a little bit of pricing on the projects, you know, in terms of when you go out for bid. You know, if there's work shortages, then people are just going to bid a little bit more competitively. You know, right now, depending on the size of the project, you got contractors that don't even need the work, so they're just throwing out ridiculous numbers. And maybe that's the only one that comes in. But so there's pros and cons of a recession. It's kind of like housing right now is so expensive, it seems like. However, the rates are at historic lows. You know, where I talked to my parents, their first mortgage was 12%, and they thought it was a great rate. You know, back in 1980 or whenever it was. But that's when the economy was growing fast, but inflation was out of control too. You know, so houses were probably a little bit more affordable if you adjust them maybe even with inflation, but your interest rate was quite a bit higher too.
How is a recession defined?
What is it? Two months of consecutive quarters of contraction, GDP.
So you could have a very brief recession as well.
Yes. That would be the hope. Yeah. Any others?
That was better than the news.
It sounds like we're in a pretty good spot. You know, I like seeing us up there high amongst the other districts as far as our
Yeah.
positioning.
Yeah.
Kansas City, I'm afraid for.
I know. Yeah.
They were at negative.
I read recently Australia hasn't had a recession in 55 or 56 years.
Yeah.
And it's all controlled by the Fed.
Okay.
The way they're,
Yeah.
Our Fed is doing a great job.
Yeah.
Maintaining inflation, like you said, the growth is 2%, not 5 and 6, and
Again,
it's
yeah.
something that's sustainable.
If you can keep it sustainable, that's ideal. You know, China has had this out of control growth up to 15% per year. Now they have to transition from manufacturing to a more service-oriented economy, and now they're seeing 6-7%. And looking for that sustainability piece, which we've done a pretty good job managing over the last 10 years for this.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you, she said, she wiped the sleep from her eyes.
It'll be much more riveting next time.
I expect a song and dance.
All right. Take the microphone too.
Based on Bon Jovi.
Throw money at us.
Living on a prayer for
The middle of the presentation, you're like, we're halfway there.
To the recession or?
No, that.
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay. The next item on the work session agenda is the facility use administrative guidelines. We introduced those to the board in December at our work session. There were some questions that you had that I didn't have answers to because I was not involved in the work of creating those revised administrative guidelines. Jeff is here tonight and Matt is here tonight to hopefully be able to help address some of the questions that we had. And I took notes and identified some of the question areas from before, but if there are other questions that people may have in regard to those administrative guidelines, we can just talk through those. Again, as they're administrative guidelines, they don't require board action. but this is a great format for you to give us feedback on that work. So one of the questions that we had was in regard to the change in participation under Category 2 and Category 1. In the original text, it was 51% of the individuals needed to be residents of the district in order to qualify for Category 1. The change was to 75% of the participants in the organization needed to be residents of Cedar Springs. And I think really the thinking around the group, we had some discussion around this last Friday afternoon, was just in terms of recognizing and providing some breaks for residents of the community. And it was consistent with how other districts approach this number. Every district has a number in terms of residents and involvement. So I don't know, Jeff and Matt, if you want to add anything to that?
No, that's pretty accurate. I mean, we really looked at about 6 or 7 other districts, and it ranged from 51% to 80%. Most of them are in that 70 to 80%.
Yeah, it's like I'd also add that 51%, there's a good possibility that you're going to have a bulk of the participants not necessarily being from Cedar Springs, where if you were at 75%, you'd have many more people that would benefit that would be from this community.
And those kids' parents are the ones living in the community paying their, property taxes, on the debt schedules to, maintain, pay for those facilities that are getting built. So we just thought it would be more in line with some other districts and that thinking that, it's designed for this community ideally to utilize the facilities.
It's not to say that they wouldn't be able to use it, it's that they wouldn't qualify for the category.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So questions about that? Or is that clear? So the next set of questions were around item I on the next page. So page 3 of the guidelines, page 9 of our packet. And it was in regard to the process around the scheduling events, when we would schedule non-school events relative to school events. And so I don't know if Matt and Jeff want to speak to that a little bit, just in terms of the complexities of creating a master building schedule.
Was this the one where they can't schedule until at least 6 months?
October 15th or later?
Correct.
Okay. So Ken actually, he gave some insight into this, and I believe it involves the fact that what we want to do is get all of our athletic competitions and events scheduled first. And then after those are all scheduled, all of our school-related activities, then we can open it up to the outside groups, if I think I'm capturing that correctly, Matt.
So that was for H. And then the question was I. Is I necessary, or was that redundant from H? And really what we want to do is make sure that we've got all of our internal groups scheduled first before authorizing or approving requests for facilities from external groups. It just makes everyone, as rightfully so, cranky when we have to cancel an outside group because of a rescheduled internal event.
So if an outside group wants to use the facilities anytime from September to mid-October, they're just out of luck.
So that I'll have to look into.
So we could strike I think, and then just utilize that 6 months in advance. Then it would still allow them to schedule in that window as long as we had 6 months to plan
Somebody
ahead
thinks,
of that.
oh, I get all my dates on there and I'm good. Well, so there could be a calendar fill up. And then even though we would bump them off because they're not us, this negates that.
Well, and I think we probably should strike I because it gives us the flexibility to schedule something in there. As it stands right now, if we did have a good reason to put somebody in between September 1st and October 15th, we could, because we say we can't.
Right. Yeah.
I think we just made it clear to them if they're planning something within that month and a half or whatever that, hey, until we have the final school schedule, you might be bumped, but we'll write you in there for first choice after school starts.
I think Ken described it with, this is 6 months, but really there could be some things that happen here. If we know for sure that there's nothing that is school related that will take up that time period, and that they've done that, and I don't recall what the example was, it might have been something in July actually, that we know we don't have anything scheduled during that time that we could schedule this group in there.
Yeah. So I think, as I understood it as well, so that window, so all sports, when they're scheduling facilities, they schedule in the fall for winter, they schedule in the winter for spring. And so the reason for I was that we have fewer building requests for the fall schedule because most of the activities are outside. And so the reason for that language on the 15th is it gave us a deadline that we had to have our winter events planned for. And so we could authorize use during that window, but we can't authorize use for requests for December until after October 15th.
Is this something that people see when they're trying to schedule, or is this just something that
This would be,
internally?
yeah, we would share it with people.
Because I think that's confusing.
Yeah.
I think that's worded.
And Shannon, I think that's something that we did talk about was creating more of those set dates and sharing those with when is athletics, when are they gonna have that window, and then, the North Kent, and so forth, and then maybe being more, I guess, transparent on the dates.
Just saying something like if you're gonna schedule, if you wanna schedule something between July and September, we can't approve it before, I'm just throwing dates out, before April.
And these guidelines are posted on the website, and then people will call in, and Janine, the facility coordinator, will talk them through dates too, if they have questions before they even start filling out the information on school group to request dates.
So when this goes into effect, this is going to be a renewed effort that our students come first.
Yes.
That they have been bumped.
Yeah, I did have a softball coach reach out, out of frustration that CTA had our facility before we did, which is last year.
Yeah, and some of that has to do with timing of requests. So we can say no to all external groups, waiting for internal groups to make requests. Or if we have deadlines for our internal groups and we set those and our internal groups don't meet those deadlines, then, if we want community members to use the groups, or use the spaces.
What if we have a weather shift and we need to shift spring sports in and we have a community group in there? Our kids have been out.
Right,
Rather
we
than
would-
say to the community group, sorry.
Yeah. Moving forward, we would move the community
Okay.
groups out.
Yeah.
And they know that, they will know that that's what
Yeah.
will happen.
Yeah.
And we would try to accommodate them in a different space in the district if the availability allowed it.
Are we still looking at middle school is for Parks and Rec? And we're not scheduling other things in there as much? That was something that was hovering?
Yeah. I don't know that that's a written expectation or written guideline. I think it's, if we can schedule more of those events in one location, then there's less cost associated with supervising and maintaining that space.
Right.
And since Parks and Rec or North Kent Community Enrichment doesn't reimburse us for facility use, we want to try and be as efficient and cost effective as possible with them in the buildings.
So I don't think this addresses when we again have a weather shift or we're filling up gyms, we have a gym shortage. So at what point are we going to give our varsity sport or JV sport precedent? I don't think that's happening.
So clear guidelines for those extraordinary circumstances when we have to bump.
Or if our
I think it's in cancellations too,
Yeah,
if we have something, cancellations, if we spell it out in there, due to weather,
or
reschedule.
even schedule,
will be-
changes.
Okay.
I've been part of the conversations with North Kent Community Enrichment and athletics and facilities. We've been meeting somewhat regularly to talk about that kind of stuff. And that is something that I do recall that the middle school was kind of slated for being designated for that, but there has been a common understanding that our students come first. And if there is something that does get canceled, or if we need to push them out, they get that, they understand that. From the meetings that I've been a part of.
So this sentence here, school functions events may result in override any previously requested reserve space. So we have that in the cancellation piece.
Is that in there?
Yeah.
There's also, under the approval piece, the district reserves the right to revoke or approval. Oh, you might want to look at that. Approval based on the immediate needs to the Cedar Springs Public Schools event. So it sounds like we're taking priority there as well, so.
We are on paper, as long as that.
Yeah, so maybe do a better job of highlighting some of those sections, so that if a user does.
Well, I don't want them mad at me, so I'm not going to say, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it's not about being mad, but it's about, we need to advocate for our kids.
Yeah.
Who does because I'm imagining a time where maybe the communication wasn't made and you have two groups that are there and we know which one takes precedence, but the other one gets really angry and loud. Do we have someone designated to come in and kind of
Who's the
Is that
facilitator?
Yeah,
It's it's Ken and I and Scott,
if McCutcheon's in it?
hopefully we never need that, but that is that's who's been kind of heading that up now.
But I remember from, I think it was a few years ago, so I don't know if this has been a problem recently, but where there's been conflicts. And there's been coaches or there's been angry people.
And I think
They did not respond well to whoever was saying, no, this is actually something.
And I've seen that in action already, where we are able to just point to, the verbiage that says that's the way it is. They have to understand that.
I think it's a good idea that Luke Spencer to highlight that, like, what is it, A, under A, under cancellations, A and B. Just to highlight it, and so then they can see that we take precedence over.
There was another question around in item H. The last sentence, approval will not be granted for more than 6 months in advance of an event unless specific authorization for the permit has been given by the athletic director or the maintenance and facilities director. We just want to clean that up and just make that Ken, or the maintenance facility director. We don't want to have, if we leave that open to two people, there's a potential for a breakdown in communication. So the athletic director can go to the maintenance and facilities director, but ultimately that permission lies in the position of the maintenance and facilities director.
Is the athletic director in any other areas, or just that one spot, really?
That's the only one that we had a notation of. But that,
I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that makes sense to have just one point person. Yeah.
And the scheduler does report to Ken, right?
yes.
It is the only place.
And it's definitely. So
No,
it's
well, it
definitely
just-
weird that.
Our thought was just, yikes, that really sets us up. If you're the athletic director and you approve something, and I'm the facilities director, and you don't tell me, or we don't connect, then all of a sudden we have people that are frustrated. For sure.
That made me think of something else, if we could back up a minute. If it's unclear which category, user classification, a group falls under, who would make that call then?
So we talked about that on Friday afternoon, and decisions in regard to category or decisions in regard to the waiving of a fee for a specific group will lie in the hands of the maintenance and facility director, the director of human and community services, and the business and finance director. In those three positions, it will have to be a majority of vote to waive a fee to be charged or to make a determination in regard to the specific classification of a group.
So it's not any one of them, it's them collectively.
The three of them will get together and review the requests, and then 2 out of the 3 will have to side on one side or the other of the decision. So that way, the superintendent is out of it. If there's an appeal, someone could appeal to me, or the superintendent, but we just thought it would be best to have the 3 individuals most directly involved in the use of facilities and the building of community relationships to be at the heart of that decision. It just cleans it up. So that eliminates, there was a list, the Friends of Cedar Springs. We really don't know how that originated, who's on it, who's not on it. And so each organization, as they come in, will be reviewed by those 3 individuals, and they'll make determinations as to whether the fee is waived for the use, whether the group is in category 1 or whether the group is in category 2. So we're trying to start from scratch. But we will be reasonable. We know that we want people using facilities, and we recognize the value that service organizations bring to the community.
What efforts are we doing to get that out to the current user groups and to the community, I guess?
So right now, it's still a work in progress.
Sure.
But as we transition and finalize this and get the board's blessing, then we'll just reach out and communicate with each group as requests for space comes in.
There has been requests, and they're waiting for all of this as well.
Okay.
Ken, I believe, is planning to reach out to them directly as soon as these are approved.
So I would see us coming back to this one more time in February. We'll work on some language based on the feedback that we're getting tonight, and then bring back a final draft for you to give us feedback on in the next work session. We're not going to radically shift gears from what we've been doing in the past, but we are going to follow the guidelines as they're written. Okay? Any other questions or wonders?
We have an only online application. Is that, it's probably intentional, but other districts do have a PDF form that you fill out and turn in. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If that, where that form.
PDF form that they get online?
Rather than the online? Or
I don't know, I'm
as
just throwing it
another
out there.
option?
I think as another option.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, I mean, 'cause you're gonna have signatures online, you're gonna, you're gonna want, I don't know. Just throw it out there.
I think that has to do with the electronic scheduling system. And everything's just done within the system. Yeah, so maybe if we had a paper, if we had a paper copy, we could get the paper copy and then we would enter the data into the system.
Well, if they're entering the data, then somebody else is looking at it then to approve it at time.
Yeah, what would happen, so the system, I believe, again, Ken and Janina are Daily or Natalie on the accounts receivable one. But I believe when they make a request and then it's approved after they get all the paperwork in and their insurance, then it triggers emails that for reminders, and then after the event's done, it also auto-generates an invoice that's sent to them too. And then, so I think that we could, look at offering a PDF request. I think Janine would probably just end up typing that information back into the system.
Well,
Which,
you can start electronic.
yeah.
If for some reason someone's incapable or they don't
Correct.
have
Yeah.
internet or
Put
whatever
it out
the
for
case, well, I'm sure they're probably gonna come to you guys anyway and ask for a paper copy.
Did we end up with liability insurance or without? We talked about that too. Should we talk about those promises?
Yeah.
So, our insurance account executive recommends that we keep the liability insurance piece as it is. However, they recognize the fact that it does limit users, because if you're just a community basketball group that wants to run out the gym, you're not gonna go out and get liability insurance. So if they carry liability insurance like we require now, that becomes the primary, and ours is the secondary. So it's an additional layer of protection for us. As long as we're not grossly negligent, we're covered under governmental immunity anyways, but this is that extra layer. So I think the implications would be that it would, if we had to strike this area, it would, we would still be covered. It would remove that second layer of protection, and then it would also probably amount to an increase in our liability coverage, just because they're looking out at all the policies when they write our coverage each year. And it wouldn't be substantial, but it would be an increase.
Is that a part of the review? Like when you guys are reviewing, if they don't have it on there, do they then get denied because they don't have?
They do, yeah.
Currently,
Yes.
yeah, they submit the certificate of insurance.
Yeah, they have to have that before they get put on the calendar, I believe.
Well, I know I had mentioned this in a previous meeting too, but that was just the concern that I had, because there are groups of Cedar kids, 100% Cedar kids, and they're driving to Greenville, to use facilities there because of this, and I think it was pointed out before that word may in here may be required. So I think currently they're being denied, but do they have to be? Because the policy, leaves it open to.
Yes, that's where I
Yeah.
was going as well. If we
Yeah.
have that group, you three approving, do you have the ability to then review that liability and say that, okay, they don't, but they're serving our kids, this is, a good cause, yes, we will approve you from that basis.
Yeah, and the thinking was around that type of thing, that we would, the language as it's written is fine, it gives us the flexibility. So it says the non-affiliate organizations may be required to provide a certificate of liability insurance.
We could still use that group of three as a protocol
Yeah.
for determining that.
So we can waive that. So for, and we talked about organizations. So, a group of students, a parent in the district who's, coaching their travel basketball team, technically that's an organization, as we look at it. They don't necessarily have a name, although their team may have a name. So I think there's some umbrella components within the other scopes of the language that allow us to have that flexibility. We just want to be reasonable. We want to provide people with access to our spaces. I think that's how we're the best. It's how, it enhances our stewardship of our facilities.
So that just, the concern, again, is just that hasn't been happening.
Correct.
And so how do we make sure that those groups are at least considered? Maybe it's still a no, but can we at least get them to consider, so it's not just a automatic no?
And I think that's in the review process that Ken, in Ken's office, or with Janine, who does the scheduling.
My concern is it's not going to get to the free, I'll be honest. My concern is he knows they're gonna happen and then they're gonna come to us, so I just need to put that out.
Yeah, we'll note that.
Yeah, we'll have a group
but as we're writing language, we can't have, it's impossible to find provisions for each potential situation, and so we have to have a process that we can be considerate and flexible.
Because now on the flip side of that, you all of a sudden have, this group saying, well, I don't have liability insurance, and, people starting to point.
Right.
Why are you giving them special treatment and I don't have it and denying me? So I do see that as a little bit of a potential risk from that standpoint, just to play the other side.
Well, I think we have protection under if it's students.
Sure.
If it's adults that are playing, baseball or bingo or whatever, I don't know,
Yeah.
I was trying not to get support that could
Wow.
But even with that,
At a board meeting.
even with that, if we had a student group that was looking to do a concert in a gym versus another student group who was looking to just play basketball, we might view those two groups differently, even though they're both student groups. And so it will be, based on the activity, the makeup of the group, the number of participants.
One last thing, I think you want to be closed spring break too, any of these closings, I don't think it's in there.
Okay.
When the buildings will be closed, and Christmas and different times, spring break wasn't listed.
I'm just trying to strategically close that spring break.
That's
Still on there as events, or not, practices or.
Teams might be.
Right, and teams practice during Christmas too, but the outside.
For outside groups.
Okay.
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
you. That makes sense.
Hey, it takes a village to write facility use administrative guidelines, so we appreciate your contributions. It really does. We have to take input and be considerate of all sides. So, are we ready to dive into some Neola policy updates? We charge into hour 3. We charge into hour 3, and a note that The Bachelor is in the 28th minute of the show. For those of you that care. So these administrative guidelines, or excuse me, these policy recommendations are very straightforward. There's nothing that we have to consider as an organization to make changes or to make choices. All of the guidelines are either changes to targeted numeration of the policies, date changes, or adjustments to help our policies be more aligned with or properly aligned with changes in the law. So how best would you like me to proceed? Page by page, topic.
If anyone has any questions.
And does anyone have any questions? And this is our first read, so we'll review them again in our board meeting in February for approval.
I do have a question.
Oh, perfect.
It's on the very last one, the 0142.3 term.
Yes.
It appears to end in the middle of the sentence with no period.
How dare they?
I don't know if there's supposed to be a period or if it's supposed to go on for a sentence.
I think when you have it immediately, it just, it automatically stands.
It's like dropping like.
Don't even finish looking at the
Right,
sentence.
right.
But great pickup.
Because it feels like there's more to the sentence.
Yes.
One of these is already out of date,
Oh, great.
the bid threshold.
Oh.
But it hadn't been updated since 2001, so we're.
So we'll catch up.
There's a spelling error on page 92.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, I have a question about, I think it's on page 252. It says that the superintendent shall maintain a procurement and contract administration system, including affirmative steps for small and minority businesses. Are we using the same guidelines or are we using different guidelines?
What's the policy?
costing?
Yeah, it costs them.
6325.
6225.
And whereabouts?
Second paragraph, second line.
Would be highlighted in yellow.
We can talk about it next time.
Yeah, great question.
So I have one. On 2210 curriculum development. Jen, this is a really broad statement for this. Provide grade appropriate instruction on career development in each grade level from kindergarten to 12.
That's a new initiative from MDE, so
Okay.
that's an expectation. We do have a K-12 continuum of a plan. It is in each school improvement plan that they've registered with the state. So we're just getting ready to come around and revisit those here next Tuesday. And that we'll get a little bit more information about. Yep. Okay. Last year, my understanding is that each grade level and building brainstormed a list from an MDE kind of populated idea, and then they brainstormed others that would be feasible within their own buildings that would highlight the different career zones. But I think that expectation was new last year, so as we move forward with that, we'll just be much more intentional about it. And like the work that you saw with Maddie will be filled out with the help from the KISD in terms of that rubric and how we might use that and how we might expand that into other and all kinds of areas. So, yep.
Any other questions or wonders? And again, we'll circle back on these proposed changes in the February meeting on February 10th prior to taking action on approving them. Okay? The last thing that I have is just a quick update on the survey and our campaign, potential campaign. So we currently sit at having 527 questionnaires submitted for our winter facility vision survey. Again, this was a targeted survey. It went out to our parents. It went out to community members that Pam have email addresses for. If there's a link posted on the website, it's really just for people that want to engage and give us feedback. It's not a scientific survey. So to be clear on that. So really the big takeaway currently, although 527 people have started the survey, not everyone has completed the survey. So 489 individuals responded to the last question. The last question was, you've now seen the framework of the $68 million bond proposal. It's being considered by the Board of Education. If the proposal is approved, there'd be no increase in your taxes, but would extend the repayment period for a period of 18 years. If the election was held today, would you vote yes in favor of the bond proposal, or would you vote no to oppose it? So over 74% of the respondents have either indicated that they would vote yes for the proposal or that they were leaning towards voting yes. So 53% indicated that they would vote yes. 21% are indicating that they're leaning towards voting yes. Interestingly enough, only 8% of the respondents said they would vote no, and another 7% of the respondents indicated that they were leaning no. And so 6% are still undecided, 5% would not vote in the election. So it's just an interesting data point for us to consider. Remembering the EPIC MRA data that we had that was random, that is a scientifically balanced survey, indicated that we had 65% of the respondents indicating that they were either in favor of the proposal or leaning towards being in favor of the proposal. And roughly, again, it was the same percentages, although in that survey, over 50% were going to vote yes right away. Another 15% were leaning towards voting yes. And similarly, the no group was around 25% for that. So I'll have a more thorough, complete analysis for you to have as a review and reflection point for our meeting on 10th of February before taking any action about putting a question on the ballot. So, any questions?
Sounds good. Sounds like good results. So.
Yeah, it's interesting the percentages of support for the different projects. So roofs, the climate control systems, the new unit vents, air conditioning, new boilers, those are all coming in. 80% of the people are saying yes. It's those issues that, or the items that people don't necessarily see as a need, but they see it as a want. So the project at Beach, I think we still have a group of our community members who see Beach as a functional school, so why would we have to replace it? And then some of the items, the multi-purpose spaces at the high school are also seen more as a want than a need. And so therefore, proportionally, you're going to see more individuals who are not supportive of those aspects of the project. But when we look at the project in its totality, there's signs of support, at least at this point. So now it's about getting the vote out, getting a good campaign put together for information and getting people to the polls. So Jeff and I had a great meeting today at Triangle with representatives from GMB and the team at Triangle to start laying out some timelines for us to follow in the event that we do move forward with a bond proposal, and that was exciting. And then I have, we've done 4 forums with staff, and we've done 2 forums with parents and community members. Thank you to Misty for sharing a little bit of life with that group last Thursday night. And really we're just looking for feedback and trying to get some thoughts from people. It was interesting, the bulk of the comments though that came out of our conversation really were around the communication and the campaign. They didn't really have questions about the proposal. They did get the proposal. So it was a good takeaway. So it'll be interesting to see what Trent hears on Thursday. Will it be similar things, or will we start to get more information about the proposal, the items on the proposal themselves?
I have a feeling that one vote was changed. Mandy Ranger, I think she voted no, but when she was in the meeting, it seems like they flipped and were more of a proponent for it. Did you get that impression?
I did. She made a comment that made me think that.
Yeah, that it was, I think they just didn't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a really good comment of how we're using the word remodel, and instead to word it as so we could sustain the educational environment or something, instead of saying remodel. It's not just putting new carpet in, it's we need to actually, it's a need. Yeah, something.
As we looked at, or as we worked, through the different buckets in our conversation today at Triangle, really the focus was on students, and then safety, and then Stewardship. Thank you. Yeah, so just being good stewards of our facilities and of
Important to you.
And it's been interesting. So on more than one occasion now, I've heard people comment, well, what's your long-term facility maintenance plan? What is, how are you showing that you are being good stewards of our current facilities? And it's really exciting to see the work that Jeff and that Ken are doing with the flight plan, around creating that one-page strategic plan that's going to help us put together a long-term facility plan that's very comprehensive, that has, items that are addressed on an annual basis, but also being mindful of, long-term needs and long-term costs that will be incurred as we have to look at replacing various components of our facility body. And so that will be coming, those two will be sharing that information out, probably at our next update, which will be Ken's update. I don't know what that is on the schedule, but in the next 2 months, you'll see how that is coming together. So that's exciting.
So I thought it was interesting, some feedback that I did hear when we originally took on was it did seem like on Facebook and some other meetings, there was real confusion around what a long-term maintenance plan looked like and a capital infrastructure replacement plan looked like, because one is covered by existing funding and one is not. And there was a lot of confusion. It doesn't matter how often you patch something, you have to replace something, and there is a usable life. So I think that as you get into discussing that and introducing that language so people understand that this capital infrastructure is totally different than this.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I don't know how you teach it, but it's difficult enough.
Yeah.
You just have to educate when you can.
Teach it one day and one person at a time.
It comes from two different funding sources, really.
I know.
I mean, our general fund, that's for the routine maintenance and repair. Capital improvements, we can use a sinking fund, but typically those large-scale replacements of whether it's a facility or capital is from debt.
Right.
Is from debt for capital projects, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want some people to understand.
Yeah, which those buckets are separate from funding employees and education in the classroom versus the general fund that we use here in maintenance funding with that education funding as well. Let's get into this communication. Educating.
We'll
getting-
slide for that.
Yeah.
I do think the forums are very helpful. And then I know when we were in that forum, just people asking questions, try to remind them that all of our meetings are videotaped. And so if you want to know about the financial reports and things like that, it's like, just click on it and you can see all of it. And so it's just reminding people that there is communication. So if you're not going to be at the meeting, at least just click on it and you can watch it. So,
So that's all I have.
All right. We'll move on to planning. We have facility feedback forums. We already know who's going to be attending, know about that schedule. And then we have a regular board meeting February 10th at 6:45. And KIASD legislative update is April 16th. And those are kind of fun.
Yeah.
The food is fun.
Yeah, and this one's gonna be a special night, so it'll be at the City Market in downtown Grand Rapids. The food is prepared by our culinary arts students from the KISD, and it was just like they had this pear that was with like this crazy like string sugar.
It looks like hair, but
it was yummy. It was one of my few breaks in carbs since August. I didn't eat the whole thing though. And then, but this one in particular, they'll be doing some awards that will be presented. But then there's a panel discussion with members of our legislative representatives from West Michigan. So it'll be a neat time to go and listen and learn. And I think it's a great way for us to build some bridges and build some strategic partnerships, which is part of our flight plan with other Board of Education members from other parts of the county. So it's a neat opportunity. It's a free dinner. So it'll be yum.
So our culinary students, because I think Matt and my niece, Penny Hooker, she's part of the KCTC.
Yeah.
We have to do a count, or is there a sign up for it?
Yeah, so there'll be a sign up and, yeah.
Okay.
But I just want to put it out
Camera
there.
for now, pencil it in, and then Cam registers us. All right.
Do you remember timing of that? Is it usually 6:45?
So it starts they have like snacks, hors d'oeuvres, mingle time at 6, and then the dinner starts at 6:30.
Okay.
And you'll be out by 8.
They're always real good all the time.
Yeah. Cool. Last year, Heidi got me on board. Yes.
I think someone else's turn this year. Someone else is going to get more classes.
Oh,
I may as well.
I don't need somebody who makes cookies every day.
opposed?